Hello, this is winter sowing number 2. I'm going to just go over some of the information that I may not have said or emphasized in my first video on the how-to of winter sowing. Some of the reasons why you should try this, outside of the ones of pure ease of doing this method, is that plants that need a longer grow to harvest season, I think this would benefit. Plants that do well in the cool and the colder spring weather, they would do well with using this system. Those would be plants like the brassicas, the broccolis, and the cabbages, and the kales, and the cauliflowers, and the kohlrabis, and the onions and leeks and things like that, the cole crops. It gives you just a jump to the season. This I don't view as an either or process. I view it as a supplement to my gardening that I do. Things that you may have to consider is that the plants that you use for this method, root vegetables, they're very hard to transplant, and they don't like their roots disturbed. So they may not be something that would be beneficial to try and grow. But this being my first year, I'm going to stick to these cole crops. And maybe next year, it'll be more experimentation with this process. There is some caution that I would advise in this method. You have to dig these transplants out of your containers. They aren't being grown in cells, individual cells, where the seedling and its roots all stay in one particular area. These seedlings are planted almost en masse with, 3 to 4 to 6 in a container. You're still going to have to dig them out, and their roots are going to be intertwined with the little other seedlings that are in the container. You may have some root damage. You need to be careful, and then there may be transplant shock for these little seedlings as they go out into your garden. Those plants that have short harvest times, like radishes. Radishes are like 21 days. To me, they're just as easy to grow directly into the soil as to try and transplant from a winter sowing jug out into the garden. Lettuces, leaf lettuce, I usually use the cut and come again method. So I broadcast my seeds, and I just, I cut them off, and then they'll keep growing and provide me with more leaves. Head lettuce might be something that would be better with this method, because you want that lettuce to grow up and form a nice hard round ball of tight lettuce. I'm not ready to jump into this process with my peppers and my tomatoes. I have my seed starting operation downstairs in my basement, and I think I'm going to stick with this and harden them off and plant them in the garden when the soil and the light conditions and the temperature conditions are all just right. Beans are another thing that I don't consider that I will ever use with this method. I don't think that beans transplant well, and they need some warm soil. So I will use some of my soil warming methods to warm up my soil for the beans and plant them directly. Besides, I have a lot of beans that I plant, and I think just the massive amount of jugs and the massive amount of transplanting I'd have to do would be a little bit time consuming. Melons and squashes are another thing that they're plants that are very fast growing, and I worry that they will overgrow these containers very quickly. Condensation builds up on the inside of these containers. The leaves press out. They get wet. If you have a cold snap or a freezing temperature, that water is going to freeze. Those leaves are going to get frostbite. And then you have a plant that's in shock and almost needs to start all over again in its growth cycle. What I prefer to do is take a milk jug, cut the bottom off, and use it as a cloche over the top of the soil where I have the melons or the squashes planted. This heats up the soil, and it also protects the melon or the squash plant from severe cold temperatures, and you can just take it off if the temperatures get too warm, put it back on cold nights, and easy off and on like that, rather than to use this method for the winter sowing. This week I added 4 more plants to my sowing jugs, parsley and cilantro and not kohlrabi, I have kohlrabi out there already, cauliflower and some Swiss chard. My parsley and my cilantro seem to reseed very naturally, and I'm always digging them out of the garden to put into the area that I want them to grow. And this way, maybe if it works out, I'll be able to take them directly from the jugs and put them where I want and not have to worry about all those little babies that are all growing up in the 4 corners of my garden. So, well, when you take your jugs outside, after you've made them up, take them outside, there are a couple requirements that I'm not sure that I mentioned, but I want to reiterate. You need to put them not under an overhang. They need moisture. They need the rain. They need the snow to keep that soil moist. Don't put them on the drip edge, because then they get too much water and become waterlogged, and maybe would even be harmed by fungal disease or something like that. You don't want them in a place where the water collects either. In any kind of container where water will not drain away, or in low-lying areas of your grounds. They need to be good drainage at all times. Also, they need sun, so they would prefer a south-facing surface. I would suggest in your garden where they are going to be planted. They should be out of the wind as much as possible, and you need to check on them. If condensation forms up on the top and the sides of the jug, that means it's moist, it's good. If you have a warm and a sunny day and there is no condensation, then you should check on them for sure to make sure that they have an adequate amount of moisture in the soil to perpetuate the germination. So remember, clear or opaque containers, not anything that would block out the light. If there are labels on the side of your jugs, it's best to remove those labels because you will want to block out the sun. You want as much sun to come in and shine on those mini greenhouses as you can possibly get. Right now, nothing is really going to germinate, at least in my area. Maybe in areas 8, 9, or 10, maybe 7, 8, 9, or 10. They're getting a little bit warmer, but we're not warmer. But just the other day, we did hit a magic number. We now have 10 hours of daylight. All seeds, all living things need at least 10 hours of daylight in order to have photosynthesis happen and thus germinate in the seed and grow seedlings. But we don't have warm enough temperatures yet, so that's not happening. But as every day goes by, we get a little bit more sunlight, and hopefully our temperatures will get a little bit higher, and springtime is just right around the corner. So if you enjoy this video, please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. If you have any comments, please place them down below in the comment section. I'll try to answer any questions that you may have. And join me for my gardening adventure this year in 2021 and see what that brings you and I on our journey. Okay, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next time. Bye-bye.